everyone, and welcome into Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Another chance for us to get together, make our picks for the big games of the upcoming weekend. And for this particular weekend, I use big in air quotes because while I think there are a couple of pretty fascinating matchups here in the SEC, the actual slate of games, probably not quite what we had a week ago when there was so much attention around Texas and Alabama, and even Colorado's win against Nebraska generated huge television ratings and probably one of the biggest betting handles of all time, at least when it comes to the regular season. This week's slate, probably a little bit of a step down, but you do get back into some very interesting games again next weekend there too. But even in a situation like this, in which the marquee matchups aren't quite and large number, there is still opportunity for bettors out there, and we're going to be paying very close attention to that on today's program. Prior to that, though, let's give you a couple of housekeeping notes. First of all, our good friend Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews not with us here this week. He has sent in his picks. I almost said he's mailed in his picks, but that's not probably quite giving him the credit they deserve. He has shared with us his picks, and so I'll be reading those on the program here today. And, of course, Dari will be back with us again live next week. We're looking forward to all of that. But we do have Mike Griffith on hand, Connor Riley on hand, Jeff Sintel on hand, and I am here as well. And so before we get ready to make those picks here for this week, let's take a minute to look back at the tote board after 2 weeks of action and see where these standings are. It was a big move for Connor Riley, a little bit of a step back from Mike Griffith. And so now after a 5-1 week, Connor Riley sees himself at 8-4 on the year. He is tops in the standings. I was dead even last week, 3-3, but still a winner on the season at 7-5. Dari Payro winning week at 4-2. That gets him to 6-6 on the year. Mike Griffith could not sustain success, 1-5 on the week, putting him at 5-7 on the year. And Jeff Sintel, after a 2-4 week, is 5-7 on the year there too. But it's still anybody's ball game in our season-long contest, and still plenty of winners to be had. And of course, all of this made possible by our friends at R.S. Andrews. And whether your picks are winners or not, you can always be a winner when you trust R.S. Andrews for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Still going to have warm weather for quite some time to come. That's the way it goes here in the fall in Georgia. And so if you want to make sure your air conditioning unit's still equal to that task, go ahead and get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. R.S. Andrews makes that really easy for you. It may only cost you $99, so find them online at rsandrews.com, and you'll get everything you need on that. So check them out online, rsandrews.com, for more. Also, let's get ready to check out the Georgia Bulldogs beginning SEC play, hosting South Carolina on Saturday. Gamecocks, of course, in the marquee matchup they had to begin the season. Losers in Charlotte, North Carolina. Georgia 2-0 after two-nut matchups against the likes of UT Martin and Ball State. A major step up in competition, but Georgia's still a massive favorite here. The number we're going to be going with sees the Dogs favored by 27.5 points against South Carolina on Saturday. So in the order we always go with, Mike Griffith, starting with you, what is your thoughts on Georgia starting SEC play as a 27.5 point favorite against South Carolina?
Well, I mean, I think Georgia's going to finish this game. I mean, they got shut out by a MAC team in the fourth quarter and lost their cover last week. And push the Vegas line, lost the cover on the BA line, getting a little bitter about choosing Georgia and them continuously underachieving. And yet I understand what Kirby's doing. You know, he's investing in the future of the program, playing a lot of these young guys. I think this game's different in terms of being a statement game. Jamon Dumas-Johnson said that. He is the heartbeat of that defense. He's the guy everybody rallies around. Absolutely plowed South Carolina last year. I don't think 27.5 points is that big of a number for Georgia when Georgia is actually concentrating on putting points on the scoreboard instead of developing talent and glorified scrimmages. So give me Georgia. Sooner or later, they got to cover one of these spreads, BA.
So Mike Griffith on the side of the Georgia Bulldogs minus the 27.5 points. Jeff Sintel, you are next up. What do you think about the Dogs as a favorite to begin SEC play?
Well, guys, I think the word of the week for me is steadfast. You guys remember at the beginning of the year, I had I basically had a proclamation that I'm picking the Dogs to cover each and every week. So at the end of the year, we'll look at my final record, and we'll have probably a -13 albatross next to it, -12 albatross next to it for always picking the Dogs to cover. But believe in this offense, believe in the quarterback, believe in that stingy, salty defense. Give me the Dogs to cover.
So Jeff Sintel on the side of Georgia there as well, taking the favorite once again. Connor Riley, a little bit of a clean sweep here for the Georgia Bulldogs here thus far. Do you want to join that, taking Georgia minus the 27.5?
Ideally, I wouldn't want to take Georgia here. The first 2 weeks, I've been smart enough to avoid the trap and take in the opposing side. And Georgia, won comfortably in both those games, but didn't cover. Maybe I'm listening too much to what the players are having to say this week, but I think they're going to cover in this game. I think they know they have a chance to go out and make a statement. I don't think Kirby Smart likes Shane Beamer all that much, and he doesn't have a problem rubbing it in. I probably should take South Carolina here. I think Spencer Rattler's actually pretty good, and I know you and IBA have talked about this before about how we feel about him and Bo Nix. I think Rattler's been really impressive to start this season, but with as bad as South Carolina's offensive line has been this season, I think Georgia got a chance to really run up the score here. So give me Georgia at that key number of minus 27.5.
So Connor Riley also on the side of the Georgia Bulldogs, and as Connor said, kind of underneath that 28-point number there. DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers, perhaps no surprise here, 96% on the side of Georgia. And I'm going to join this too, make it a clean sweep here thus far. And Connor said, first 2 weeks of the year, I have very happily gone with against Georgia when it comes to the spread in these kinds of games. We were on UT Martin plus the points. We were on Ball State plus the points. That was close from a spread standpoint, but Georgia failed to cover in both those spots. But this is a very different kind of game for Georgia here. I'll give you a couple of numbers to point this out. When you look at, the last 10 times that Georgia's been favored by more than 30 points at home, Dogs just 2-7-1 against the spread, facing the 30-plus point spread there at home. However, when Georgia's been favored at home by less than 30 points, which it is obviously on Saturday, they've covered in 4 of their last 5 there in that spot and in 6 of their last 8. Plus, when you look at the SEC play here, that's another spot in which Georgia's actually been very good against the numbers. 7-3 in their last 10 against the spread against SEC competition, 13-7 in their last 20 against the spread in SEC competition. So this kind of spread, which for Georgia is actually nowhere near as large as some of the spreads that it sees, and against this kind of opponent, an SEC team, Georgia's actually been really good in these spots. Not every trend matters, but I believe these trends do. I really, really, really like Georgia minus the 27.5 there on Saturday. Now, this is normally the portion of the show where I would ask Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews if he wants to go with the flow and take Georgia. You probably already know what his answer is going to be. In this particular case, he's saying yes. So there you have it, a complete clean sweep on the part of the Georgia Bulldogs. Everybody taking Georgia minus the points. But not all of us have taken Georgia against the number here thus far this season. So I think it speaks to the confidence we have for Georgia against South Carolina on Saturday. And with that, we are off and running with Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews here this week. And we'll turn our attention to way back in the 1990s was about the biggest game the SEC offered us on a yearly basis. Back then, it was the debut of the CBS slate of games, typically coming right after the U.S. Open tennis tournament came to an end. It's Peyton Manning, it's Danny Werfel. It's been a big deal throughout the years. It's also been a series, for the most part, dominated by Florida, although that has changed as of late, especially a year ago with the emergence of Josh Heupel there at Tennessee. Close game, though, in Neyland Stadium last season. You're talking about Tennessee winning that one by just 5 points. It was otherwise a much better year for the Vols than it was for the Gators. But on Saturday on the road in the Swamp, Tennessee sees itself as a 6.5-point favorite in this game against Florida. So, Mike Griffith, I go to you with Tennessee favored on the road at Florida. What do you want to do with the 6.5 points?
Brandon, I was trying to look back to the last time Tennessee won in Gainesville. It was a long time ago, way back. And even with my binoculars, I'm having a hard time remembering. And I was there for Casey Clausen taking down the Gators. I think Tennessee's going to win this game, but I don't think they're going to cover the spread. Give me the Gators in the points against Tennessee in a sold-out Swamp that will make it hard for Tennessee to communicate and make it hard for this new cast of Tennessee characters to execute. Going with the team that I think runs the ball well enough to stay close. Tennessee wins, but Florida covers.
So Mike on the side of the Gators as an underdog there in that spot. Jeff Sintel, how about for you? Tennessee, 6.5-point favorite in Ben Hill, Griffith Stadium.
Wow, we got Mike breaking out binoculars and props. That's how engaged he is right now. Really wanting wanting to reverse that 1-5 record, and Connor just takes a big swig of his thermos every other week and rolls out winners. Gators Falls, man, this game, when I look back into this game used to really mean something. It used to really, really mean something. It doesn't anymore. I think this is another nail for Billy Napier here. I like Tennessee in this game. I like for them to cover as well.
So right now, a lot of love for the underdog, the Gators here in this spot. Connor, how about you? Number 6.5 for Tennessee on the road at Florida.
I know Tennessee didn't look great last week against Austin Peay. Big spot for Joe Milton here. In real life, I took Florida week 1, and I was so disgusted by what I saw from Billy Napier in that team that I said from that point forward, I cannot pick Florida to cover any spread the rest of this season. I was just so let down by not the talent, not Graham Mertz or how he played, but just the way that team was coached. And Josh Heupel, say what you want about his offense, specifically when it goes against Georgia. He's going to have those guys ready to play. Billy Napier, who knows, if they're going to figure out how many guys you can have on special teams wearing the jersey number 3. I think Tennessee knows they got to shore up and stop that run game. They did that against Virginia. I think they're going to do it against Florida. I like them at this key number here. Give me Tennessee, even as a road favorite here, -6.5.
DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers agree with Connor on that, 81% on the side of Tennessee, but I disagree. I'm going to put myself alongside Mike and Jeff here in taking Florida, and I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why. Reason number one, you look at what Florida did poorly against Utah. A lot of this is the kind of mistake, penalty-oriented things that I believe can be cleared up, typically are from kind of a week 1 game as the season progresses here. I don't think this is like a 2-win Florida team. As sloppy as they were against Utah, I believe they're destined to see some improvement there. You've also got history working against Tennessee here in this spot. I mentioned before that even what was otherwise a very good season for Tennessee last year and a much better season than the one that Florida had, Tennessee still only won that game against Florida in its own stadium by 5 points. This is the largest spread in favor of Tennessee in a game at Florida since at least 1976, which is about as far back as any kind of point spread records are going to go. Tennessee's never been favored by more than a field goal in this stadium, yet they find themselves as about a touchdown favorite there on Saturday. Also keep in mind that Florida last year 5-0 against the spread as an underdog last season. So while it was a bad year for Florida, it was also a spot in which at times, Florida actually performed better than expectations. I think this is one of those games where, Tennessee doesn't have a Hendon Hooker quarterback anymore. Joe Milton, I believe, is a step down. You certainly don't have a Biletnikoff wide receiver like a Jalen Hyatt. I think this is a spot where Tennessee probably comes away with a win, but I do believe it's way too many points to give Florida at home. I think they play better here than they did in Salt Lake City to begin the season. I'll take Florida plus the points. And at that point in time, it'll be time for us to now ask Dari Payro whether or not he wants to go with the flow and take the Florida Gators. And he does. So the flow on the side of Florida there, not a good team, but point spreads change the evaluation here. And so given that large of a spread there at home, I think that Florida looks like the better overall bet here. But certainly we'll be watching that as it's one of the few games of any kind of note, any kind of interest for this upcoming season. We'll also stay in the SEC now for our next pick as we look at an LSU team trying to bounce back after its Labor Day weekend loss to Florida State, trying to show itself. It's still among the national elite, maybe trying to see if it can stop its players from fighting during practice. But nonetheless, it takes on a Mississippi State team in the SEC opener for both squads. Mississippi State needed overtime last week to beat a pretty unspectacular Arizona bunch. Obviously, the story at Starkville continues to be the emergence of Zach Arnett as head coach there, obviously after the untimely passing of Mike Leach to end last season. Two teams that know each other well will meet for the final time here as foes within the SEC West as the division dissolves at the end of the year. And in this particular case, it's Mississippi State at home getting 9.5 points with LSU coming to call. Mike, what do you want to do with LSU in Starkville on Saturday to take on Mississippi State?
Yeah, this line 9.5 it's interesting. I think Mississippi State can keep this game close. I do think LSU is going to win, but I think 9.5 is too much. I might disagree with you on Arizona. They've vastly improved. They have a very good aerial attack, and I'm impressed that State was able to win that game under those circumstances. That can be galvanizing when you win an overtime game. There can be some carryover, a very pass heavy Arizona team, so maybe they didn't quite take the physical toll that maybe an SEC game would. LSU, not much competition last week. As you pointed out, BA, a pretty drastic loss, second half collapse. Give me LSU to win, but I'm going to take Mississippi State to cover the 9.5 points. So to be clear, Mississippi State is my pick for the purposes of the show.
Mississippi State plus 9.5 there for Mike Griffith. And Jeff Sintel, how about for you? The number 9.5 for Mississippi State hosting LSU.
Not scared of the number. Give me LSU. Give me LSU. I'm not worried about these points whatsoever. You just look at this series. Obviously, it is what everybody thinks it is. Zach Arnett is a first-year head coach. There's just a talent gap that I can't avoid here. The 9.5 points doesn't scare me. I like LSU. I like LSU to win this game. Probably about 14, 17 points.
So, Jeff, on the side of the favorite, Connor Riley, how about for you? Split decision amongst our scribes here in an SEC game between the Bulldogs and the Tigers.
Yeah, I was worried that if Jeff had taken Mississippi State there, I wasn't going to be able to pick the team that I wanted to because if those two are in lockstep, that's just a no-go for me there.
That would require Jeff taking an underdog, though, Connor.
I'm siding with Mike here. I think he made some great points. I agree with him on Arizona. I think that's a better team than people are maybe giving them credit for. And I'll say this about LSU. They cannot run the football. And I know Jeff talked about the talent gap. This is the most experienced team in the country in Mississippi State. This is a physical defense. And let's be honest, the last time LSU played anyone worth anything, Florida State in week 1, they quit in the second half of that game. And I think this Mississippi State team under Zach Arnett, they're going to take on the personality of the coach. They're going to be physical. They're going to be a tough out. I like Mississippi State plus the 9.5 here at home.
This doesn't matter, but I am curious. So how come y'all think Arizona's so much better this year than they were a year ago?
Year 2 under Jed Fish. They've got some real talented pass catchers there. Jaden DeLora back as the quarterback. I like what that Arizona program is doing and trending in the right direction under Jed Fish.
68% of DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers on the side of LSU here. And whether it's a better Arizona team this year or not, it's certainly a very different kind of result for Mississippi State, who won in Tucson last year 39-17, but needed the overtime in Starkville there last week. For the LSU side of things, though, this is a spot that in the first year of Brian Kelly, they have not been great in this situation. Just 1-3 in 4 times as an SEC team on the road in 2022. But perhaps this is a certain degree of stubbornness, but I'm still going to take LSU. It's a lot of points to give on the road. I suspect, though, right now that Mississippi State is not what it once was when Arnett had the luxury of being only the the Mississippi State defensive coordinator, and you still had Mike Leach running things with this offense. Right now, this is still an offense very much in flux. Will Rogers, the quarterback, I mean, he's barely, thrown the ball all season as much as he would have thrown the ball in one game a year ago. Huge changeover happening here offensively. I think this is a Mississippi State team that's still trying very hard to figure out what it is. And for LSU, this is a team that I had ranked among the national elite to begin the season. So I can't abandon them this quickly, even though we've obviously seen some troubling signs. They're not using Harold Perkins the right way. They only have 1 sack on the season here thus far. As Connor said, they've had issues running the football, and I think they're playing the wrong quarterback. But other than that, I still am going to take them minus the 9.5 points here because I still believe this can be a top-flight football team before the year's done. And if it is that kind of team, proving that in Starkville, Mississippi is the type of thing they're just going to do, you have to believe that's at least a possibility. So I'll take LSU minus the 9.5. That puts the flow on the side of the LSU Tigers there as well. At least I believe it does. And Dari Payro is going to go with the flow, and he is also going to take LSU. This may be one of those where after 3 weeks of the season, I have to kind of completely recalibrate and say LSU is just clearly not what I thought they were, and then cut bait in the hopes of not throwing good money after bad. But for now, I'm going to change my mind slowly on the Tigers, and I believe they still have a chance to prove something there on Saturday. So that puts the flow on the side of LSU. We will stay in the SEC for a non-conference Power 5 matchup as the Missouri Tigers get ready to host Kansas State. Missouri there in Faurot Field sees themselves as a 4.5-point home underdog. It's the type of game we typically wouldn't even pick on this show, but you got to pick something, and this is about as close as we get, at least when it comes to SEC foes there on Saturday. So as the Wildcats come calling on the Tigers, Mike Griffith, what do you want to do with Missouri as a 4.5-point home underdog here?
Yeah, as you know, Missouri's home field can be raucous, but it's a noon start. Kansas State, I think, is one of those underappreciated teams, and I don't think 4.5 is that much. I mean, Eli Drinkwitz, they've been a really tough team to figure, but I'm going to go against the trend here and go against a home SEC favorite in a non-conference game. When is the last time we've seen a Big 12 team go into an SEC stadium as an underdog and beat an SEC? Oh, wait, that was last week. Texas did it to Alabama. Give me Kansas State, lay the points.
So Mike Griffith on the side of the Kansas State Wildcats here, coming up from the Little Apple. Jeff Sintel, how about for you? The number is 4.5 for Kansas State at Missouri.
Yeah, fellas, I made a mental note. I believe I was watching Missouri play, I want to say South Dakota earlier this year, and I said to myself, Jeff, mental note, always pick against the Tigers. You saw the way they played. They had trouble picking who their quarterback is. You tell me Kansas State is in the number one defense in the country right now against the run. Not scared of points. Give me Kansas State in this one. I think they're going to make Eli Drinkwitz a sad man on Saturday evening.
So Jeff taking the favorite here once again. Connor Riley, a little love for Kansas State here at the moment. You want to join that? -4.5 there in Como?
Missouri is so dreadful that I am actually going to side with both Jeff and Mike here. This is a team that found itself in a dogfight last week against Middle Tennessee State. I think this is a pretty decent Kansas State team, won the Big 12 last season, and the quarterback Will Howard is good. They've got one of the better offensive lines in the country, certainly in terms of NFL draft prospects. They also have a Connor Riley on their team.
Really?
However, he does not spell his name properly. But give me Kansas State here, -4.5.
61% of DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers side with the SEC, though. They take Missouri, so a little bit of a difference in opinion with our scribes there. I like Kansas State, too. The only thing that scares me is I don't understand why this number is what it is, because when you look at the overall situation here, you're talking about a Kansas State team that's 3-1 in its last 4 against the spread, playing against the SEC. Missouri hasn't won a game against a Power 5 non-conference foe in the regular season since September of 2019. I guess the one thing they do, kind of have going for them a little bit, they are 4-1 in their last 5 as a home dog of a touchdown or less. That's the one trend that sort of speaks to Missouri here. But, I agree with a lot of what's been said here thus far. Missouri's just really bad. And I believe this was a team that I think at one point in time had hopes that a Jay Garcia or a Sam Horn would have emerged as the quarterback. But really, Brady Cook is that guy. We saw a year ago that Cook's just not a very effective quarterback. And it seems like he's still the best option for Eli Drinkwitz here right now. And that's just not a very good football team. I like Kansas State minus the 4.5 on the road, but it makes me nervous as to why the spread is this low. Obviously, Missouri is at home, but it makes me nervous why the spread is this low, just given the fact that almost everything speaks to I just think a Kansas State win. It all points to Kansas State, and yet the spread's still only just 4.5 here. So be careful, I guess, because Dari Payro wants to go with the flow. He takes Kansas State there as well. So, do with that what you will. A lot of love here for Kansas State. But the folks out there in the desert kind of telling you there's maybe something to know about Missouri here that's not necessarily demonstrated by the pretty meager 2-0 start that included a very close win against Middle Tennessee State from the week prior. So be careful there with that. We'll also talk about an SEC team against a Big 12 team here now, too, as Arkansas gets ready to host BYU. Arkansas typically plays one of the toughest schedules in the entire country, the entirety of the SEC West. Also, the kinds of tricky non-conference games that are certainly pretty tough there as well, including playing in Provo, Utah a year ago. But this season, it's BYU traveling there to Fayetteville, and Arkansas seeing itself as a 9.5-point favorite here right now. Perhaps the most important thing to know about this game for Saturday, though, one of the true difference makers in the SEC, running back Rocket Sanders, is out and not available for the Razorbacks, so factor that into your evaluation here. But Hogs favored by 9.5 against BYU. What do you think, Mike Griffith?
Yeah, this is an interesting game with the Rocket out, but listening to Sam Pittman on the SEC coaches teleconference this week, he certainly seems to embrace the big game environment. Was more than willing to talk about the SEC's non-conference issues and carrying the banner. And to hear Sam sound that confident, was enough for me to buy in. I'm going to take Arkansas and lay the points against the BYU Cougars.
So Mike laying some lumber there with Sam Pittman. Jeff Sindel, how about for you? Arkansas favored 9.5 against BYU.
Fighting Pittman's against the Cougars. I think this is the second meeting I recall last year. What is it? The Razorbacks put up something like 50-something points in Provo, won by maybe 2-3 scores. I like Arkansas here. I like to lay the point. I like to lay the points. I like KJ Jefferson to kind of keep that momentum going as perhaps the best quarterback in the SEC this year. I think Rocket may be parked for this week, but I think the Razorbacks have the weapons to keep it going. And every time I think of KJ Jefferson, it reminds me that there was one point many years ago when Jim Chaney was recruiting him for the Dogs, and he told me he built his arm strength up by throwing rocks at everything. Street signs, whatever you want to say, trees. I think he throws darts now, and I think he'll do so against BYU. I look for the Hogs to win big.
So laying some more lumber there on the side of Arkansas, and Connor, that brings it to you with Arkansas favored by 9.5 points here at home.
I hate doing this, but
no way. You're going to go in lockstep with me and Jeff twice on the same show?
I unfortunately am. I have not gotten a chance to do this so far this season, but yes, sir. Give me the Hogs here. I will say, because BA, as I'm sure is he about to lay out, BA is quietly down on Sam Pittman and the Arkansas Razorbacks. He's going to tell you about how they've lost some momentum. Sam Pittman, be very careful with this game. Do not go out, mess around, and lose to a BYU program. Otherwise, you're only going to further, give off the idea that maybe you don't have this program headed in the direction that you once seemed to have with that upward trajectory early in his career there, make even more people like BA lose faith in what Sam Pittman can do. I, however, am still very much a believer, and I like the Razorbacks to cover this weekend.
81% of DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers agree with Connor and Jeff and Mike. They are on the side of Arkansas, and Connor is right. I've been a little suspicious of Sam Pittman as of late, going back to last year. I love Pittman, of course. I root for him openly to win games, but I did not really like the version of Arkansas I saw last year. However, let me be just extraordinarily candid here for a moment. I believe the Razorbacks are trying to do everything they can to change that here right now. And I want to kind of give you some insight. So I have made 6 best bet picks beyond the regular picks that we're doing for our, win-loss record on our show. And I'm just 1-5 here thus far. Admittedly, I've gotten off to a really rough start with my best bet picks here thus far. But the one that I did nail last week, I believe I have a little bit of an inside track on. I think that Arkansas is going to be a heavy team to the under for the foreseeable future. This week's total kind of reflects that. It's just 47.5 points for Arkansas against BYU. This is a team that was legitimately awful on defense a year ago. I believe it's the struggles that Barry Odom had as Arkansas defensive coordinator last season that largely explain why Dan Enos, a very different kind of offensive coordinator than Kendall Briles, is that replacement there in Fayetteville. I believe that Arkansas wants to play slower. That's Enos's calling card. I believe they want to try to help their defense here a little bit. And in a season which Sam Pittman needs to win some games, more defense, slower pace, a lot of running the football. I believe that's the way they want to do it. Now, they don't have Rocket Sanders here this week, but ultimately running backs don't move the spread by a huge total, if any total there at all. I believe they're going to run KJ Jefferson a lot on Saturday. In other words, I believe that Arkansas wins a very low-scoring game, but in a game that goes under such a low total, you can't cover a 9.5-point spread. So I think Arkansas is actually fine not to cover this spread. I don't believe they will because I think that Sam Pittman knows he just needs to get the win. So I'll take BYU plus 9.5 in a game that plays out very much the way that Arkansas wants it to. Low scoring, low total. You'll hear me mention this again at the end of the show here today. But I do like BYU plus the 9.5 points. However,
Brandon just laid all that out to say that once again he is doubting Sam Pittman and picking against Arkansas. Don't let him sugarcoat the fact that he is now hating on Sam Pittman and picking against him.
This was a terrible defense last year, and listen, I love Sam Pittman, but Barry Odom almost ended Pittman's coaching career. He just too soft, too soft in line of scrimmage, trying to put all those guys in pass coverage. They just didn't stop anybody. They just didn't. So Odom being gone, I believe, is the best thing that's happened for Sam Pittman. And I do believe the pace at which they're playing right now, I think gives them a chance to win more games than they were going to with the tandem of Odom and Bryles together last year. That's kind of oil and water in terms of the way both those guys played. So I like Arkansas to win, which is what matters to Hogs fans, but I do like BYU plus the points, which is what matters to us here on this show. Before we get to those best bets that I mentioned a moment ago, I will tell you that Dari Payro also goes with the flow. He takes Arkansas here, so pretty much it's everybody against me on BYU plus the 9.5, so we'll see if the wisdom of crowds shows up on that, but a lot of love there for Arkansas. Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews also on the side of the Hogs plus 9.5. And for our final game, admittedly, once again, having to try to reach out and grab something here of note in what is pretty, uninspiring slate of Week 3 games. We'll turn our attention to what has been, I think, the most entertaining story in all of college football here this year, and it is legitimately a turnaround that is living up to the hype. A week after winning as a 3-touchdown underdog outright on the road against national runner-up TCU, Colorado follows it up last week with a home game against Nebraska where they won in impressive, resounding fashion in a game in which just a few days prior to the win against TCU, you could have seen, Colorado as much as a touchdown underdog, ended up being about a field goal favor, and the point spread wasn't even a factor as Colorado coasted and sailed to an easy win. The Buffaloes right now have at least 2 Heisman contenders when it comes to Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders there at quarterback, and they also, for the first time since 2019, see a matchup with their in-state rival, Colorado State. The spread is large, as you might imagine. The Buffaloes right now a 22.5-point favorite. Deion's the biggest story in the sport right now. Mike, what do you want to do with Colorado favored by 22.5 against Colorado State?
Wow. Well, that's interesting. Deion certainly has captured a lot of attention. I'll pick Colorado as much as I really don't want to. Colorado State waylaid by Washington State earlier this season. Sooner or later, Colorado's going to have to lose against the spread. There's a lot of people betting on Colorado. A lot of fanatics have caught on and liked the story of the Buffaloes. And certainly Deion Sanders is, an iconic figure in the Atlanta sports market, with his history with the Falcons and the Braves, certainly flamboyant. So give me the Buffaloes and lay the points.
More than 8 million people, by the way, saw the win for Colorado against Nebraska on Fox this past Saturday. So that's Mike on the side of Colorado minus a large number here, 22.5 points. Jeff Centil, how about for you when it comes to Colorado State and Colorado?
Hey guys, I think we're in full zigging and zag season now with Connor. Mike, how about this? Maybe we need to send this to committee. Maybe if we have Connor pick first or lead off some weeks where he could not play the odds and calculate that Rain Man brain about, well, I'm gonna go this way, I'm gonna go this way. Just something for us to put back into committee. Maybe the scribes and writers give their picks in order of the standings, something like that.
Yeah, like whoever's in first. I'm good with sticking with it because I don't want to make any excuses. But I think that's something for the commissioner, Brandon Adams, to consider.
I'm fine. I'm fine with.
He's been doing it for 4 years now, man. We know his game. We've seen this before. To get on the track, I predict that somebody at Colorado State said something bad about Deion Sanders in his tracksuit about 3 or 4 years ago. Somebody's got some receipts on the Rams. Maybe they didn't like what happened when Colorado played those Mike Bobo teams or something like that. Lay the points. I think Shedeur throws for 300. I think Travis Hunter catches another 115, plays another 112 plays in a game. Give me the Buffaloes. Give me Deion. Give me more primetime.
So a lot of love for Deion here right now. Connor, you have both been called out and also set up for your pick here. Do you want to join the other folks in taking Colorado here minus the 22.5?
I'll pick first. I'll pick last. It doesn't matter. I'm going to pick winners. I'm the best there is.
Oh, goodness.
Give me Colorado here. Colorado State, it's second year another coach there. Look, I don't want Deion to be great. I don't love what he did in turning over that program this offseason, but at a certain point, you keep doing the same thing and getting the same results. That's the definition of insanity. So give me Colorado here to cover. They got a big game next week against Oregon that I'm sure BA will love to slip on our card then. But Give me Colorado here, as Jeff laid out. Shedeur Sanders, another big game for him this week.
So 95% of DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers on the side of Colorado here in this spot. Deion, just a pretty big deal right now, including making a big impact on Georgia fans here in this spot. I'll admit, I don't believe I quite realized how bad Colorado State had become. This is a team that got blasted by Washington State to begin the season. Of course, Washington State followed that up with a fun win against Wisconsin last week, so nothing to apologize there. But they were like 3-9 the year before that. This is also a rivalry at one point in time used to kind of mean something, and it actually was one of those in which Colorado State had a little bit of an upper hand for a while, but they haven't played since 2019. In the last 10 meetings, prior to that, Colorado State just 1-9 against the spread when it comes to the Buffaloes, and during that span, Colorado's been about the worst team in the Power Five for at least the last couple of years. So it gives you an idea of how bad Colorado State is. I have also committed myself to kind of going against Colorado in the thought that eventually there may be a kind of a come down to earth moment. There is very little about Colorado State to justify taking them here because they're just really, really bad. But perhaps it's a little bit of a step down in atmosphere, just given, what the last couple of weeks have been, maybe a little bit of a look ahead, as Connor said, to a much larger game next week against Oregon. I'm going to take a flyer here on Colorado State plus 22.5, but as I can attest here, God is my witness, if Colorado covers this number, I don't believe I want to keep going back against them over and over again. I'm going to have to be a lot more judicious about that choice. Last week is a little bit of a blind bet against Colorado for me. This week, I'm going to try one more time to go against the Buffaloes, and if this doesn't quite work out, then I got to try to come up with a little bit of a new strategy because clearly there's not much to recommend about Colorado State. This is about a worse atmosphere, a perhaps flat look-ahead spot, and a chance to take a flyer here on maybe Colorado coming back down to earth here a bit. So I'll be on the side of the boys from Fort Collins here. Dari Payro, though, going to go with the flow, and he's going to take Colorado. So in that particular spot, a lot of love for Deion and the Buffs and a renewal of a rivalry that has not taken place in quite some time. And that should be a lot of fun to be able to see. That is also all of our picks for the traditional six that make up the standings that we showed at the beginning of the show. But now we get to broaden our horizons. We get to go deeper down the board and try to unearth some best bets. I told you before, my best bets haven't exactly been very, very good. Just 1-5 for me in 6 best bet picks here thus far this season, but still plenty of time to change that. But for now, it's Mike Griffith who has his time to shine here. Mike, how about you? Anything else on the board you want to highlight and call out as a pick for you right now?
Yeah, Oregon's been like gold. Somehow a late cover last week. Pretty amazing pick 6 to get a cover. The Ole Miss game against Georgia Tech is intriguing. The Yellow Jackets a 19-point underdog. I kind of like them to cover, but I'm not going to use that as my best bet. My best bet is going to be in Tampa, Florida, where I think the Alabama Crimson Tide will flex and cover a 32-point spread at South Florida.
I don't have you at 32. I got you at 37.5, Mike, so let's be careful about that.
That's the spread I saw on the Vegas Insider is the Vegas consensus. So that's my best bet. If you want to take 37 on another board, you can. I'm going with Bama and laying 32 in Tampa.
I'm going to have to check your numbers on that because I'm looking at live action right here, but we'll see. Jeff Sintel, how about for you?
Man, the commissioner's got a lot to ponder this week after this show. Mike, did you see those shirts that the USF fans put up? They're like, we want Bama. We want to cover the spread against Bama. That was what the shirts had. Very rare SEC game going to, the dynasty that I hear is crumbling, like the Berlin Wall, going to South Florida for a game. I got a simple best bet this week. I like the under for Georgia, South Carolina. I've seen it at 54.5. I do think the Dogs cover, but I think there's no way that the Gamecocks can produce enough points to get it up to 54. I think Georgia's run game gets healthy in the second half. My best bet this week, simply put, Dogs and Carolina Gamecocks, bet the under.
I also have an apology to make to Mike Griffith. I can't read my own handwriting. I do have South Florida 32.5. I just can't read my own handwriting. So Mike is right about that. Connor, how about for you? You got some best bets for us?
Yeah, 2-0 on the season. Best bets. Iowa State under last week. Never in doubt there. I am interested in the Rutgers Virginia Tech under at 40. However, my best bet, we're going to keep giving out one as so long as we keep winning with one. We're going to go to Mike Griffith's alma mater. Washington is a 16-point road favorite over Michigan State. Obviously, very tough week there going on with Mel Tucker in the news. I have Washington making the playoff. This is not the kind of team you want to be dealing with a lot of controversy going into the week. New head coach. So give me Washington on the road as a 16-point favorite to win and cover against Mike Griffith's mighty Spartans of Michigan State.
I also have Washington -6. I have them at 16.5, but -16.5 against Michigan State there on Saturday. I don't. Sometimes you see a little bit of a rally around when it comes to an interim coach. I believe, given the nature of that situation in East Lansing, and I'll leave it at that. I don't think you see the same kind of rally around you sometimes see when it comes to interim coach. Washington, I thought, was very impressive in its Week 1 game against Boise State. That's a pretty interesting measuring stick for how good I believe that Kalen DeBoer's squad is right now. So I do have Washington minus the points against Michigan State. As I also mentioned earlier, until it proves wrong, I'm going to keep going under in games involving Arkansas. The number is low here for BYU on Saturday. That's just 47.5. But I'm going to stick to my principles there on that. They easily covered the under in the game against Kent State last week. Speaking of the Mid-American Conference, I also like Akron, Joe Moorhead's squad against Kentucky on Saturday. That number's 25.5. I like the Zips plus the points. Obviously, Kentucky's dealt with a little bit of a hardship this week when it comes to the hospitalization of its offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen. Kentucky's also not very good right now either. I think that when you think about relative to market expectations, right now the Wildcats look to be one of the more overvalued teams compared to actual performance in the SEC here. I kind of like Akron plus the 25.5 there in that spot. And the reason why I've got the South Florida spread written on my sheet is because I'm on the other side of Mike Griffith here. Alabama, even in its best year, is not typically a great team against the spread when it comes to September games. And this is a road game. Folks need to realize this game is in Tampa on Saturday for Alabama, which should not be much of an issue when it comes to winning the game. But I do truly believe this is just a little bit of a different type of Crimson Tide team, an Alabama team of a different stripe. I don't think that Jalen Milroe is a good quarterback, but I do believe he's the best they have. And I think in terms of the overall level of motivation here in this spot, the idea that, well, now finally they've gotten mad and now finally they're going to show you how good they are. I don't quite think Alabama has that club in the bag here right now. So while I certainly assume it'll be an easy win, playing on the road as a 32.5-point favorite, I'll take a shot and a flyer on the Bulls plus the 32.5 right there, and we'll make that my best bets here for the week. No best bet picks from Dari Pero, but no doubt I'm sure he'll have plenty of those to share with us again next week here at this time. So, gentlemen, great luck to all of you with all of your picks. Hope they work out well, both the ones on the board and then the best bet picks after that. And, of course, if you want to follow along, Dari Pero makes great picks on the show each and every week. But the thing that he's really famous for is the great work they do there at R.S. Andrews for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs as you get ready to settle in and watch some college football here this weekend. Don't let your weekend get ruined because your water heater goes out or something like that. If you need to get that water heater replaced, don't forget our friends at R.S. Andrews in many cases can do it for you the same day. So find them online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. You can also trust us to be back here in this same spot again next week at this same time. Best of luck with your own picks. Enjoy the football. We'll see you again next Friday for Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews.